everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bitcoin and Markets. My name is Anson Lindner. And what I do here on the show is I look at Bitcoin macro, try to know where we're at, where we're going, question my assumptions, take a skeptical point of view on all these things, and you know, just have a good time. Have a good time with the community. It's really uh, lots of activity going on in the Telegram. Check out t.me/Bitcoin and Markets. Also, I have added a new tier to the website. It is the Premium Market Pro. And what I'm doing there is I'm taking all of my price predictions, all my forecasts for both Bitcoin and macro and everything, and I'm going to be putting it out in a separate newsletter for those subscribers. So check out the new tier. It is going to be half price for the first month. So check that out. I think it's a high value deal. Check out bitcoinandmarkets.com and subscribe. All right. So what do we have on deck for today? Well, before I went live here with YouTube and with Twitter, I was going over or reacting to Powell speaking at the Economic Forum there in Washington, D.C. And I jabbered on for about 20 minutes talking about different government metrics and all of that stuff. What we were doing is kind of seeing how the market was going to react to Powell speaking. A lot of people were expecting this to be, see if Powell was going to be as dovish as he was back at the FOMC press conference. And it seems that the market is interpreting it that way. So let's go over here the charts real quick. And you can see the Bitcoin price quite heavily up to 23,000. We saw it at 23,300. Let me take some of these EMAs off and everything and go down to the 1 hour. And you can see that the market has really reacted positively to what Powell is saying. I think he's just not being bearish. It is definitely, or hawkish, I guess. It is been a noticeable change in the rhetoric that he is less hawkish than he was before. Of course, he doesn't want to come out and say, oh yeah, we're going to reevaluate right here, because that is going to undermine the market trying to price in more moves in the future. And, the Fed depends on the market pricing things in. The forward guidance, the expectation management, that is how monetary policy works. And so Powell's not going to come in just a few days after the meeting, or 1 week now after the latest policy decision, and undermine that last hike. He wants that last hike to take effect, to do its full duty there before he becomes very dovish. But all the other most of the other central banks, Canada, the BOE, the ECB, Japan, they're all pretty much signaling that they're done hiking, or they will be done very soon. Japan is still doing their massive amounts of QE, so they never even tightened. But the Fed is kind of on an island right now by themselves, being as hawkish as they are. So I think Powell wants to, he thinks he can captain this ship to a soft landing, and we'll see. I don't think it's really up to him, but so far, I mean, people hate me for saying this. People think I'm a traitor to the cause, to Bitcoin, or to gold and silver, but I think Powell has been a good chairman. He has been a relatively straight shooter. He has stiff-armed CBDC nonsense. He thought inflation was transitory, or CPI, the spike in CPI. He thought that was transitory, and I agreed with him, and I still agree with him. I think it is going to prove to be transitory. Look at the last 6 months. Last 6 months are less than 2% annualized inflation. It was transitory so far, and that brings us into, let's look at stocks real quick before we go there. So you can see stocks also reacted positively to Powell's speech. Perhaps break down some of his exact verbiage in the Telegram later, but for right now, I think that's enough with Powell. Let's go into this next story. So this is from Zero Hedge. I have a few stories here from Zero Hedge today, but I think I'm just going to concentrate on this one. And the headline is Fed loan officer paints dire picture. Loan standards approaching record tightness as loan demand plummets. All right. Loan standards approaching record tightness as loan demand plummets. And remember, QE is not money printing. Government spending is not money printing. What is money printing? Lending in the marketplace, not just US, but globally. Lending. And what happens in a bad economy when banks think that their borrowers are not going to be able to pay them back, or they're going to have less, maybe a higher amount of defaults and non-payment, then they tighten their standards. They don't necessarily raise rates. Okay, they tighten standards. Rates rise because of borrowers expecting higher profit margins, and they can afford to pay higher interest rates. So that is, they interest rates are kind of dependent on borrowers, and lending standards are dependent on banks. So, okay, here we go. Late last week, when looking at the most recent senior loan officer opinion survey held by the Fed, we noted that the surge in revolving credit has not gone unnoticed by lenders. The on-bank lending practices showed banks tightening lending standards for commercial, mortgage, and credit card loans. Now, would they tighten lending standards? Because the economy is going south. All right. As Bloomberg's Vincent Signornella observed, quote, tighter credit likely will drive slower spending and reduce good Lord, a tighter credit likely will drive slower spending, a reduction in risk, and the potential for the Fed to pivot sooner rather than later to avoid or shorten a potential recession. That would be more good news for bond bulls, okay? Furthermore, the tightening standards are a result of most banks assigning the probability of between 40 and 80% to the likelihood of a recession in the next 12 months, with no bank reporting a probability less than 20%. Needless to say, in a recession, loan losses soar, which is why banks are seeking to limit their exposure, having already boosted credit loss provisions heading into 2023. So let's look at this, the boosting the credit loss provisions, loan loss provisions, the highest since, in the aftermath of the great financial crisis. I guess if you take out COVID, it's the highest since the great financial crisis. So, banks are worried. They are tightening their lending standards, and they're beefing up on their loan loss provisions. Okay. As luck would have it, today the Fed released the latest SLOOS report, just ahead of tomorrow's monthly consumer credit update. And it should come as no surprise that standards tightened again while demand weakened broadly for commercial and industrial loans for firms of all sizes, as well as for all types of commercial real estate loans. Even more ominously, on the household side, banks also reported weaker demand on balance for credit card, auto, and residential real estate loans, as well as for home equity lines of credit. Here are the three main findings. So let's just digest that. The demand is going down. Obviously, rates are higher, and rates went up because people expected that this quote unquote inflation would continue. And their profit margin, negative real rates. That's what everyone keeps talking about, is negative real rates, where the rates for loans, or the interest rate, is below the inflation rate. So people thought, oh yeah, my profit margins, even if I'm flat on my business, even if, let's say I'm in a low margin business and I get maybe 5%, okay? But I expect to make the same kind of business, the same volume. It's just that prices are higher. And so maybe my margins will be 10%. So I can afford a little bit higher percentage on any sort of business loan or whatever. So loans, the interest rates go up on those loans. But now when it starts to reverse, interest rates are still high, but people can't afford. They are starting to then tighten their belt even more, and they can't afford the higher interest rates, and so the amount of credit crashes. Okay, the amount of people wanting, demanding new loans crashes, and of course, if money is printed in the process of making a loan, and new loans crashes, and the interest rate is very high, so you need more and more. One reason why the CPI was stuck around 1 to 2% for so many years was because that was the minimum necessary to pay off new loans. So if you think about it, if there's 100 units of money in an economy and someone gets a loan, and then someone borrows all that money, but there's an interest rate of 5%. So you have to pay back principal plus interest, right? So by the time that loan is paid off, the amount of money in the economy needs to grow by 5% just to service the debt. So when GDP was 2% and CPI was 2%, that's not a coincidence. It is the minimum amount of credit that must be produced to service the debt. And in that case, you have low growth and low inflation, period. But let's say you have interest rates around 5%, and now all of a sudden your growth slows, new credit creation slows to 0%. Well, you're going to have a ton of defaults. And what is defaults? Defaults is also destroying money. I mean, we're setting up here for a pretty big deflationary shock if this is the case. So not only are banks tightening lending standards, but the demand for new credit is dropping dramatically. So this is turning into a deflationary scenario very, very quickly. And so, like I said up front about Powell and being a straight shooter and saying it's transitory, I mean, there are no signs. I don't know of any signs out there whatsoever that say that CPI is going to stay higher for longer. It's crazy to me that people think that. Point to one data point. Everything is saying credit is slowing down. CPI is over. High CPI is over. We're slipping back into recession. I still am on the boat of a soft landing as the most likely scenario. But that's because we have so far to fall with nominal GDP. We can fall nominal GDP to 0, and it's going to feel really sucky. But if the price deflator also falls to 0, I mean, it's going to be a very mild recession officially. I mean, it's going to feel like a horrible recession, but officially it will be a mild recession. So that's still what I am leaning towards. But there's nothing out there. I don't know of a single thing that people can point to as a reason other than their bias, and they think QE is money printing. And they think government spending is money printing. That they think inflation is somehow going to be self-sustaining. Wages aren't rising all that fast. And even if they are, that is, there's no new money being created. So that is not sustainable either. To sustain higher wages, you need to have more credit creation happening in the economy. Well, I just showed you in that story that credit creation is falling off. So it doesn't make sense why inflation, quote unquote inflation or CPI, is not transitory. That just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's all I have for today, guys. Join me on Telegram for more live stream stuff like this. I do have a couple other topics that I want to hit on very soon. Maybe I'll do a couple of live streams over the next 24 hours. So we'll see. Stay tuned. T.me/Bitcoin and markets. Follow me on Twitter at Ansel Lindner. The YouTube is BTC Market Update. Make sure you like and subscribe and comment down below to help other people find the YouTube channel. And lastly, don't forget there is a new tier at bitcoinandmarkets.com. It's where you can get all of my economic forecasts, macro Bitcoin price predictions, technical analysis, fundamental analysis, comparative analysis. All of that stuff can be found on the new tier Premium Market Pro at bitcoinandmarkets.com. All right, guys, thanks for joining me, and I'll check you on the next one. Bye.